This is the 2015 EOC Training for Algebra 1, Wood Creek Middle School. Everyone should have already completed the test security training at your campus, including viewing the 3 TEA test security modules. You're also responsible for reading the test security supplement, which is located on our staff common, and your test administrator manual. Once you've completed this training, you may come and pick up your end of course manual, which is different from your normal STAR manual that you've been using this year. We'll be testing our algebra students on Tuesday, May the 5th, and then Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday we will continue makeup testing. The time period will start after the test administrator has read directions and tells students to begin working on their test. This will be announced over the PA system around 9 o'clock for you to start, but as soon as the students are in the room and you're ready, you may begin with the instructions. Start time for the test session must be recorded on the seating chart. Students must record all responses before the end of the time period. They will not be given additional time to record their responses on their answer documents. Please keep reminding them of this as you also remind them of the time that they have left to test. Once the time period has ended, test administrators will instruct any student still testing to put their pencils down and close their test booklet or exit their online test. Stop time for the test session must be recorded on the seating chart. Announcement of time left to test. It is crucial that you communicate orally or in writing the amount of time left to test in 1-hour intervals and, if desired, in shorter intervals during the last hour. Students who do not complete their test within the time limit should submit what they have completed. Students who arrive late will be determined on whether or not they still have enough time in their school day to eat lunch and still take 4 hours worth of testing. If they do not, then they will be asked to return for the makeup testing. Each student must have their full 4 hours in which to take the test, and students who begin testing after others have started will have a later stop time. Late arriving students must be kept aware of the time they have left to test. If they arrive late, we will get their instructions read to them, come pick up their manual, and bring you their manual and their Scantron after we've read the instructions, and then you will start the student and you will record the start time that they actually start, not the time that we started reading the directions. There will be a late arriving sticker placed on the front of their book, and in the event that they don't finish in the time left before we pick them up for overflow, they will get lunch and go to overflow testing. Breaks included in the time limit that are not allowed to stop the time clock are water breaks, bathroom breaks, snack breaks, and short physical or mental breaks. Breaks not included in the time limit required to stop and restart the time clock are lunch, emergency situations that significantly interrupt testing, consolidation and movement of students to another testing area, and medical breaks. Test administrators should document stop and restart times when breaks are given, and if there is an emergency situation, you need to document that on your emergency log that's in your blue log sheet folder. If a student requests a snack break, make sure the hall monitor is aware of their plan to take a snack. Do not just sit them in the hall without telling someone. Students must be supervised at all times. Students are not allowed to test in the hall while they're taking their break. Students may stop testing to take a supervised lunch. These are our overflow students, and they will be picked up prior to lunch starting. The testing time will be stopped for the lunch break and will restart when students resume taking the test. Stop and restart times must be recorded on your seating chart, and you will fill out the overflow tracking sheet that's in your blue log sheet folder so that we know exactly what time you started and what time they finished before leaving for lunch. Students must place their answer documents inside their test booklets so that all secure materials can be collected and placed in locked storage. If students are testing online, they must exit their test. Students must be monitored by trained testing personnel and are not allowed to discuss any test content during lunch. For our lunch schedule for our algebra test, all algebra testers will have D-lunch. Accommodations for students taking the algebra exam are on the green accommodations roster that will be sent to you the week prior to testing. You are required to notify students of their testing accommodations prior to the day of testing, but this is not the responsibility of the test administrator. This is the responsibility of the testing coordinator. I will take care of that along with Sarah Middleton to make sure students are aware of their accommodations. You should have a room accommodation roster for each room with any type of accommodation. The test administrator will need to sign off on the roster to ensure they are aware and understand what accommodations the student will receive. Any items needed on the roster will be in your testing bucket. Allowable testing procedures are also listed on this same roster. In the event that one of your students has transcribing as an accommodation on the math test, they must have a transcribing griddable questions answer sheet. The test administrator will use this to transcribe the student's responses onto the answer document. Test administrators who transcribe must sign the bottom section of the oath because he or she is seeing secure test content. Allowable procedures and materials are available to any student who regularly benefits from their use during instruction. Students cannot be required to use these procedures or materials during testing. Some of these include signing test administration directions, translating directions into the native language of an English language learner, allowing a student to read the test aloud to themselves, reading aloud or signing personal narrative, expository, literary, or persuasive writing prompts, making assistive tools available, scratch paper, colored overlays, highlighters, colored pencils or crayons, blank slates, markers, or magnifying devices. Giving permission for students to use tools to minimize distractions like a stress ball, allowing individual and small group administration, and gently reminding students to stay on task. These allowable test procedures and materials are listed on the green accommodation rosters that are in your testing bucket, and they will also be emailed to you prior to the test day. Materials that are listed on those rosters will be included in the testing bucket. However, if something is requested and it's not listed on the roster, then you can refer to page 13 in your manual to make sure it is an allowable procedure or material, and then ask a hall monitor to get what you need. Every test administrator must undergo test security training prior to test administration. You must administer tests according to the manual, no deviating. No person may view, reveal, or discuss the contents of a test booklet or online assessment. Only students may respond to test questions, perform calculations, use strategies, and create rough drafts to written responses. Test administrators conducting an oral administration or who are transcribing student responses must be aware that they are viewing secure content and are required to sign a separate section of the test administrator's oath. Students who may be cheating. Test administrators should immediately stop the student or students that they suspect of cheating and note that stop time on the seating chart. Then you have to contact the campus testing coordinator to let him or her know that cheating is being suspected. Do not investigate without contacting the campus testing coordinator. You cannot review student answer documents or test books without authorization from TEA. If a campus determines that a student has been involved in an attempt to cheat on a state assessment, the campus is required to invalidate the student's test by marking the score code O for other on the student answer document for the corresponding test. Additional disciplinary action may be taken at the local level in accordance with district policy. The district must submit an LDDA, locally determined disciplinary action forms, to TEA. Through active monitoring, the test administrator can change the seating of students as well as the use of privacy screens to prevent cheating, but you must document on your seating chart those changes in their seating. What can you do to prevent the following irregularities which occurred in Humble ISD in spring of 2015? An entire class of students didn't write his or her name on the front of the test book as required in the TEA directions. To prevent this, read the directions exactly as stated in the TA manual and verify that students are following directions. This is required even if a name label is on the test book. Students were not monitored during bathroom or lunch breaks. Actively monitor hallways, bathrooms, and lunches. Test administrator did not read any instructions from the TA manual. You must read all directions in bold exactly as stated from the manual. If you forgot your manual, ask your testing coordinator for another one at bucket checkout. During an oral test administration, the test administrator read reading passages to students, causing the test scores to be invalidated. Know exactly how testing accommodations are given. If you are unsure, ask your testing coordinator. Students took STAR instead of STAR A. Accurate information must be given to the testing coordinator from the ARD and 504 committees 2 weeks prior to testing. However, if a student informs you that they feel they are in the wrong testing room, stop, lock, and call your testing coordinator to find out if we need to move that student. All irregularities are reported to TEA. How to handle emergencies is listed on page 33 in your TA manual. If a school emergency arises that represents an actual or potential danger to students, such as a fire alarm, students should go quietly outside following campus regulations for exiting the building. They must leave all their testing material in their room, including their backpacks, cell phones, etc. Be sure to lock your door if you leave. If you need a magnet for your room, since some of you will be testing in rooms that are not yours, you can pick those up at bucket checkout. Please remember that your main concern is yours and the student's safety first. But while you're monitoring them, there is to be no talking so that when they finish, when we have clearance from whomever, we can go back into the building and begin testing again. And we want to make sure students haven't been discussing test questions. The responsibilities of testing personnel are as follows. You must prepare for administration and review your administration manuals. Read your test administrator manual and test security supplement, and the supplement's located on the staff common under assessment. Review and sign your security oath. Prepare your testing environment. Ensure that you are giving proper testing procedures. Check your student IDs and ID numbers to verify that their name and ID matches your testing roster in Scantron. If the student doesn't have their student ID or does not know their ID number, then you can ask them to verify using their birth date, which is also listed on your testing roster. Read your directions from the TA manual to students. Read electronic use and cell phone policy. Be sure that you're actively monitoring while the test is taking place. Complete all the administration processes that are listed in your testing folder. Maintain test security and confidentiality at all times, and report any irregularities to your campus coordinator immediately. In order to prepare your testing environment, you can review pages 27 through 30 in your TA manual, but you need to make sure that sufficiently the students are separated. Hang a testing do not disturb sign on your door. All bulletin boards and instructional displays that might be a source of direct answers should be covered. Clocks need to be in the testing room. They may be analog or digital. All desks or computers used for testing must be cleared of books and other materials not required for the test. Make sure students also cannot see materials that may be lying on a table or the teacher's desk. Make sure those areas are all also clear of any materials. Star A, Star L, or SOA. For those rooms, we need to make sure that every effort is made to prevent students from seeing one another's monitor and ensure that there is one pair of headphones per student for online administration. More information about how to fill out your seating charts is located on page 29 in your manual. The seating charts must include the names of students testing, the location of each student while testing, the names of all test administrators, monitors involved in the session. Additional seating charts must be completed if students are moved to another room during testing. Seating charts must include the start and stop times for each session, including stop and restart times for students who are permitted a break, then stops the time clock. Schedules must be created and adhered to the time limit requirements for testing. All of your required test materials will be in your bucket. For your paper administration, you will have pencils and erasers for your students, one test booklet per student, one answer document per student, room accommodation rosters if applicable, a seating chart, an attendance roster that you need to place outside your door by 8:45, testing do not disturb sign, how many students are still testing sign, a hall monitor needed sign, your cell phone policy, and any additional TEA authorized materials needed for administering the test, such as supplemental aids or allowable testing materials, which is all located on your roster for accommodations. If you have an online administration, you need to also have your room accommodations roster, which will be in your bucket, your seating chart, again, your attendance roster that needs to be placed outside your door by 8:45, testing do not disturb sign, how many are still testing signs, the hall monitor needed sign, your cell phone policy. Instead of Scantrons, you will have your student authorizations. You still will have pencils for use with scratch paper, headphones, and any other additional TEA authorized materials needed for administering the test, like supplemental aids or allowable testing materials. For the algebra students, they are each allowed to have a graphing calculator. In fact, it is a requirement they each have a graphing calculator. This is the same if the student is taking star L or star A. Keep in mind that all memory must be cleared to the factory default both before and after testing. There is a form in your testing bucket that tells you exactly how to clear the device. However, most algebra students are very familiar with this process. Calculation devices on smartphones are not allowed, and that includes the new iWatches. When you're taking up cell phones and electronic devices, you need to also be aware that many students may have recently purchased the new iPhone watch, and so be on the lookout for those. Those do need to be picked up as well. Calculation devices that have a computer algebra system are also not allowed. Students should be provided with the same type of calculation devices usually used in their classwork. For all of our students here at Wood Creek, you will be giving them a calculator that we have purchased here on campus. These are the same calculators they use in class every day. Calculators will be checked out along with your testing bucket. There will be a separate form with the materials control form to check these out. You will have a roster for what calculator each student was assigned to, and you will be required to fill this out and turn it in after testing. These calculators are about $100 a piece, so we need to be very careful that each student that uses the calculator knows that they are assigned and responsible for that calculator and that it is returned. You will turn your calculators in after testing and sign the calculator form as well once you've done so. There's a form with your testing materials that I spoke of earlier that does instruct you on how to clear the calculator's memory. If you choose to not have your students do this when they turn in their test, then you will need to make sure all the calculator memory has been cleared. Otherwise, this is a testing violation of confidentiality. Some things to keep in mind to make sure you're ensuring proper testing procedures. Remind the students that their answers that they mark in their test booklet are not scored. All answers must be placed on their answer document or in the online system, and it must be done within the 4 hours. Please continue to remind them periodically to record those responses on those answer documents. And remember, you must record your responses on the answer document is the appropriate thing you need to tell them. And I recommend doing this each time that you tell them their time update. It is permissible to encourage students to stay on task. If you have a student who's constantly falling asleep or putting their head down and you see that they're not working at a good pace, then you need to walk over and remind them that they only have 4 hours to test. Please sit up and please get busy. Only students are allowed to erase their stray marks or darken answer choice circles. So you might need to tell them to be sure to erase any stray marks that you may have accidentally made on your answer document, or to please bubble in darker for their answer choices or erase more completely. And you can quickly tell them this when you're picking up their Scantron if you see any issues. But just remember, do not point to any test items or refer to any questions individually. For star L or star A, student authorization forms will be in your testing bucket, and this is considered secure test material. This is the form that allows students to know their logon information for TestNav. This form takes the place of a Scantron because all of their answers are reported online instead of on a Scantron document. Students must click on the TestNav icon from the computer desktop to launch the online testing program, which is different from the directions in your manual and also different from the directions on the student authorization form. But they must use the TestNav IE icon, which stands for Internet Explorer. The student will log in using the information from the student authorization form and follow the instructions in the TA manual. This is a sample of the algebra Scantron. Make sure that when you're reading the directions that you double check that students are recording their test book number in the upper right hand corner where it says test booklet number. The test administrator needs to make sure that the students record the form number, and it is located on the front of their test booklet, and there is a place in the manual that asks for this information to be read to the students. And we are allowing the students to put their form number and bubble The test administrator is responsible for checking that this is accurate and was done correctly when they pick up the materials from each student. Test administrators must bubble the test date and the score code. When you pick up the student's document, you're going to write the date of the test, which will be 05 because we're taking this on May the 5th, and then you're going to bubble an S for score. If there are any students who are absent or who receive an O while testing, the testing coordinator will take care of this. You're only responsible for the S. Please refer to page 35 in your manual about answering students' questions. Test administrators may answer questions about test directions or procedures only. Test administrators are never allowed to answer any questions related to the content of the test itself. They can only say, "I can't answer that for you, just do the best you can." When collecting test materials, test administrators should quickly scan answer documents only to verify that responses are marked. If a student has not done so, the TA must say, "You've not recorded your responses on the answer document. Please go back and mark your answers on it now." Also check to make sure the name of each student is written on his or her test booklet before you collect it. Verify that no answer documents have been left in the test booklet. Also verify that the students have not bubbled any information on the front of their Scantron. Their Scantrons are pre-coded and therefore they do not need to make any bubbling on those Scantrons. When returning your test material to your campus coordinator, you can review some of these things on page 37 in your test administrator manual, but your buckets need to be packed as you received them. So the first thing in your bucket will be your orange folder that includes your Do Not Disturb sign, your number still testing sign, your cell phone statement, and your hall monitor needed sign, and then put the clip inside of your bucket. You'll have your pink absent folder included unless you had students who were absent, and then you will put their Scantron and their test booklet in that pink absent folder and give it to the counselors at check-in. Your blue log sheet folder, you're going to turn in any unused logs that you can keep those in the folder, and then any used logs, you will turn those in at the table when you turn in your other test materials. Then you'll have your manila to be shred folder. This will include any graph paper, scratch paper, or formula charts that students pulled out of their test booklet. Students are not allowed to leave the room with anything that they have written on during testing, and none of those items are allowed to be thrown away in the trash. Also in this shred folder, if you put post-it notes out to tell students where to sit, then you need to include those as testing material in that to be shred folder. Then you'll have your folder with your testing plans and your directions, then your test booklets, number side up in order from least to greatest, your Scantrons in alphabetical order, and your pencil bag that has your pencils, your timer, your eraser, and sharpener. Test checkout begins at 7:45 in the foyer area outside of the nurse's office. Be sure that when you're taking your bucket and looking through your things that you complete your checklist for checkout, and then you'll complete your checklist for check-in as well. You must sign out your materials control form items, which are your test booklets and your Scantrons, and you'll also sign your calculator checkout and check-in. And that materials control form will be signed again when you return your materials, so those numbers must match. Blackshear and Martinez will be doing the checking out and checking in of buckets. All rooms will be walked on May the 4th. At 8:30 that morning, I will start walking rooms, so please make sure Monday, May 4th, that all rooms are ready to go. That includes desks already being in rows and everything ready as if the kids were testing that day. Testing will begin May 5th at 9 o'clock. You can go ahead and start reading your directions once the students are dismissed and brought into your rooms, and then Mr. McDonald will make an announcement around 9 o'clock for them to start question number 1. If you have a student that needs transcribing, you will complete this in the testing room with the student present if the 4-hour time limit has not expired. If it has expired, then you will transcribe when you come to check in your buckets, and I will be the one that looks over to make sure that your transcriptions are accurate. If you're still in your 4-hour time limit, then you can give the Scantron back to the student and have them double check the accuracy from the test booklet answers to the Scantron. At bucket checkout, test administrators are required to bring their test administrator manual. Remember, this manual for the EOC test says EOC on it, and it is different than the manual that is given to you for regular STAR testing. This way I know that you have the correct manual and you have it in your hands and are able to use it on test day. Directions must be read aloud word for word. The say directions are in bold. The words in italics are information meant for you and should not be read aloud to students. Place a sticky note or flag on the appropriate set of directions. For algebra, your directions for the paper administration are on page 55. For Algebra Online Testers, page 69. For STAR L Algebra, page 75. And for STAR A Algebra, page 93. All makeup tests for students who missed the May 5th administration must be completed on or before Friday, May the 8th. Makeup tests will occur in the library daily until the 5th of May, and I will be personally conducting all of the makeup tests, and the library will be closed throughout the rest of that week. Some of you taking this training may be giving large group tests. Others of you may be assigned to a small group. If you're assigned to a small group test, that means you may be giving an oral administration, a STAR A, a STAR L, or an online test. And I'm about to go over the training for those of you who are small group. Please check your testing plans to see if this applies to you. If it does, then you will need to continue on with your small group testing training. Please remember, it's best if you have any questions to stop, lock, and call. Most situations can be handled and irregularities prevented if you will stop what you're doing and just ask before moving forward and trying to make a decision on your own about what to do to take care of a situation. If you need anything, my extension is 5215, but best to reach me on test day is by getting a hall monitor to find me or an administrator, or call Mrs. Funderburg's desk at 5206 and she will radio me. If you are assigned as a small group administrator, you must continue through the rest of this training. There are different types of oral administration. There are read parts of the test questions and or answer choices at student request. There's read all test questions and answer choices throughout the test. The test administrator will know the type of oral administration the student receives because it is noted on the room accommodations roster. If the student is receiving oral entirety, it will say Y-E for entirety. That means you are to read everything that is allowable to be read to the student. If it says Y-W, that means it's words and phrases or upon student request. STAR A test administrators are allowed to read only some pop-ups and rollovers. This will be covered in the STAR A training. However, STAR A test administrators must be familiar with the examples contained in this training. When a test administrator reads all test questions and answer choices throughout the test administrator must have a test booklet with the same form number as the student. For STAR, Form 1 is the overage in all shipments. This will most likely be the form that is used for oral administration groupings of STAR. When a test administrator reads parts of test questions and or answer choices, it is acceptable to read over the student's shoulder. Test security for oral administration. All security measures outlined in the test administrator manual must be followed. TAs must be aware that they are viewing secure content and are therefore required to initial and sign an additional section of the Oath of Test Security and Confidentiality for test administrators. Test administrators may not respond to test questions, make notes about test questions, or discuss the content of the test at any time. Test administrators may not write notes or calculations in a test booklet. If you are giving any sort of oral administration, please familiarize yourself with Appendix B of your test administrator manual. Any part of the test may be read aloud to an eligible student if they're taking algebra, biology, or U.S. history. This applies to words in the questions and the answer choices, including words in the graphics. The test administrator must read aloud the test questions and answer choices in the order they are presented. The test question must be read aloud prior to reading the answer choices. When a test question contains a graphic, such as a table, graph, grid, diagram, map, photograph, cartoon, or picture, say to the student, look at the answer choices and mark your answer. If necessary, say, tell me whether you would like anything read aloud. And then when you're reading it aloud, you must point and only read. You cannot tell them what the plot means or what the graph is trying to say. When a test question contains a graphic, table, graph, grid, diagram, map, photograph, cartoon, or picture, say to the student, take a few moments to look at the graphic and tell me whether you would like anything read aloud. Then let me know when you are ready to go on. When reading aloud words, numbers, or symbols, be careful not to aid the student in interpreting or analyzing the information, since the ability to interpret and analyze is part of what is being tested. Remember, when reading a graphic, you're only allowed to read aloud what is on the page itself. You are not allowed to ever define any terms. When a test question contains a text box, you may read aloud the text. Do not interpret or analyze any of the information. You may read aloud the box text in its entirety. When content-specific terms and symbols appear in a test question or answer choices, read them in the same way the student hears them in daily instruction. This will ensure that the test is administered accurately. The examples shown are only samples. Many other content-specific terms and symbols exist. Please make sure you familiarize yourself with these symbols as you're looking through Appendix B. I also have a symbols list if you feel like you may need help on what the symbols are and how to refer to them when giving an oral administration. Required reference materials may be read aloud to an eligible student. This includes the state-supplied mathematics and science reference materials. Allowable accommodations may be read aloud to an eligible student. This includes a supplemental aid. Test administrator procedures are as follows. Test administrators may read aloud any word, phrase, or sentence in the test question and answer choices as many times as needed. At the end of the test, the TA may go back to reread a question and its answer choices at a student's request. The TA may wait to read aloud the next question and answer choices until all students are ready to go on. TAs may also walk around the room and quietly read aloud the questions and answer choices to students at their own pace. However, keep in mind that if a student has oral administration but does not have extra time, it is the TA's responsibility to make sure they're keeping track of how much time they're allowed to spend on each question so that you don't fall short of your time period. TAs must be familiar with content-specific terms and symbols associated with the subject area test. This will ensure that the test is administered accurately. If you have any questions about those symbols, please see me prior to test day. I have a form that I can give to you so you can familiarize yourself with the symbols and how to phrase them when giving an oral administration. TAs must not rephrase, clarify, or interpret any test content. TAs must keep their voice inflection neutral. However, words that are bold-faced, italicized, or printed entirely in capital letters must be emphasized. Unauthorized verbal and nonverbal assistance may not be provided to students. Test administrators must be made aware of the different levels of reading support that can be provided during an oral administration. For each student receiving an oral administration, the TA must know which level of reading support the student is to receive and whether the student can change the level of reading support during testing. And all of this is based on the documentation in the student's paperwork and will be given to you on their student accommodation rosters prior to test day and again in your testing bucket. On the testing plan, if it's stated that you're giving a student that has LEP accommodations, then you must continue this training. If not, then you may be completed with your training and go straight to your quiz portions of this training section. The next portion will deal with a LEP accommodation. The following is a chart that explains the linguistic accommodations for English language learners, or ELLs. For math, STAR tests, they are allowed to use a bilingual dictionary and extra time. For STAR L, they're able to use a bilingual dictionary, extra time, same day, clarification in English of word meaning, and reading aloud of text are provided in the online interface for all students taking Star L. For Star A, they're allowed a bilingual dictionary, extra time the same day, and clarification in English of the word meaning. Bilingual dictionaries as a linguistic accommodation for ELL are as follows. They are allowable for Star A, and Star L for the Algebra 1, Biology, and U.S. History tests. It is considered a linguistic accommodation. They can use it to translate words and sometimes common phrases from one language to another. It may include pictures as long as pictures do not illustrate content, terminology, or concepts. The following are the allowable and non-allowable formats of these dictionaries for the English language learner accommodation. Subject-specific or topic-specific dictionaries, like a science dictionary, academic language dictionary, are not permitted. Bilingual dictionaries that contain occasional pictures are acceptable as long as the pictures do not illustrate content, terminology, or concepts. Electronic devices that translate beyond the level of words and set phrases are not considered bilingual dictionaries and are not permitted. Only dictionaries by reputable dictionary publishing companies should be used. No dictionaries produced by school districts or service centers are allowed. Here is what is allowable for ELL. For Algebra Star, they are allowed a bilingual dictionary and extra time same day. For Star L, they're allowed a bilingual dictionary, extra time, and clarification in English as provided through the online interface. Test administrators will not provide additional assistance. For Star A, they're allowed a bilingual dictionary, extra time, and clarification in English of word meaning provided by the test administrator. Clarification in English of word meaning is allowable for all Star A tests for math, science, and reading. It is per student request only, and the test administrator may clarify the meaning of eligible words and phrases. Test administrator may use simpler English, pictures, and/or gestures when clarifying the meaning of eligible words or phrases. The test administrator is not permitted to define, explain, or illustrate content, terminology, or concepts assessed. Clarification is allowable on multiple choice items in reading, and test administrators are not permitted to clarify or otherwise explain content, terminology, or concepts, provide any assistance that aids the students in finding the correct answer. For Star A clarification in English of word meaning, it is still upon student request. The test administrator may clarify meaning of occasional words and phrases in Star A reading and writing selections using simpler English, pictures, and/or gestures. The test administrator is not permitted to clarify meaning of entire sentences or longer portions of text. Test administrators must not provide assistance that aids the student in determining correct answers to test questions. Test administrator is not permitted to read aloud the word being clarified if the word is not eligible to be read aloud, indicated by Do Not Read icon. The test administrator must not clarify the meaning of vocabulary, expressions, or other phrasing specifically assessed in a test question. Please note, when clarifying the meaning of words, test administrators may reference a dictionary and are not required to give definitions or explanations from memory.